Under the hood, there is an incredible racing sim in Assetto Corsa Competizione. It's a pure nuts and bolts recreation in a similar vein to iRacing on PC, one of the most accurate at laying out the variables of driving GT3 class vehicles. From the way tyre heat and pressure change as you run the laps of an endurance race, with weather dynamically shifting over the course of the day, to the granular detail of the car setup, everything is here for you to tinker with. On paper, it's an ambitious idea, and it pays off here in some truly authentic racing with a steering wheel in hand. However, if you've a high-spec PC, you'll be familiar with how difficult this game is to get running at 60 FPS, making the recent ports to PS4 and Xbox One a curious proposition. Can an authentic racing sim experience like this make the jump to console unscathed, or is something lost in the process? Let's find out. First up, it's worth noting that, as the sequel to the original Assetto Corsa, a lot has changed. Competizione makes the jump to Unreal Engine 4, moving away from the bespoke in-house tech used before. This opens the doors to a wealth of settings and rendering techniques native to the technology, dynamic resolution, temporal reconstruction, and lots more. Sadly, the transition isn't a flawless one, and there is a downside. What's most striking about the move to Unreal is the new frame rate target on console. Previously, Assetto Corsa ran unlocked with full screen tearing on PS4 and Xbox One, but always falling short of a full 60Hz. The upside at the time was PS4 Pro could actually deliver 60 FPS surprisingly well using its boost mode, which you can see here. Now I'm getting ahead of the game a bit, but this is what the Pro version of the latest sequel looks like, a 30 FPS cap. Clearly, this takes adapting to. In fact, you'll have noticed it's not even a stable 30 FPS cap. The frame pacing is all over the place, and it averages at 30 to 33 FPS. It's possible this is a simple error that can be fixed. All we need is a firm lock at 30 with no variations, and it'll immediately look a lot better. The motion would be more consistent with less screen judder. Still, the point remains that even in the best case, PS4 Pro, for example, and the other consoles have bailed on the 60 FPS dream, which is so crucial to the moment-to-moment action of any racing game. Every degree of turn to the steering wheel, especially at high speeds, has a colossal impact on the result. And for a hard-boiled simulation in Assetto Corsa's tradition, it matters even more. You may adapt to it, but the bottom line is, it's the first thing you'll notice when playing. Compared to PC running at 60 FPS here, it's a night and day difference. Accepting that you're getting 30 FPS then, how do the visuals hold up on console? Some context first. It's clear after tinkering on PC that Competizione takes serious horsepower to run at max settings. My GTX 1080 Ti, for example, is paired with 32GB of RAM and a Ryzen Threadripper 1950X CPU, and even then I struggled to max it out. Gradually dropping all the settings to a hybrid of medium and high gets this set up to a locked 60 FPS. For more CPU constrained platforms like Xbox One or PS4 though, it creates doubts going in as to how far they could be pushed. Clearly the simulation logic is hugely taxing, and the project seems more geared towards PC or even next gen machines. I'm happy to say though, 30 FPS cap issues aside, the turnout is surprisingly, well, rather good on the visual front. Let's kick off with the resolution stuff first. First up is Xbox One X. Here you get a 3840 by 2160 target, but with a dynamic system that lowers the pixel count under load. You'll enjoy a 4K image in very occasional spots, the side view from the cockpit during practice runs mainly, and some replay angles. For the rest, I must say the game does tend to run the gamut, down to a lowest figure of 2688 by 1512. That's 70% scale on both axes, as seen when filling a track with 19 AI cars in heavy rain. Typically the image quality jumps between a native 1512p and 4K, though really the scale is so seamless you won't notice. It's a great sharp looking picture all round on X, either way. Next up, let's look at the base Xbox One. Native resolution, a dynamic 1080p. Again, the reality is it's very rarely hitting 1920 by 1080 outside of practice mode, and I've seen 1344 by 756 at lowest when really pushed. From a majority of test samples, it's usually rendering at that lower end figure. That comes in at, again, 70% scale on each axis of the full HD target. Another unique point for the base Xbox One is signs of temporal reconstruction. You'll see the scene filled with checkerboard artifacts as the camera switches viewpoint in replays. Reconstruction is an option on the PC version, using visual data from the previous frame to improve detail in the current one. It's seemingly only used on Xbox One though, the result being the least clear picture of the four consoles, but still surprisingly respectable. A quick comparison next, showing these two extremes. Base Xbox One and the X model represent the highest and lowest spec machines here, with PS4 and PS4 Pro in the middle, and so you get a great sense of how the visuals scale just by looking at these two targets. Most obviously, the drop off in resolution makes the biggest difference, but otherwise you'll note downgrades in shadow quality on base Xbox One. There's also a slight tail off in draw distances for grass and possibly tweaks to LODs on the vehicles as well, difficult to catch in motion. Otherwise, the assets, the effects, and everything in between appear to translate evenly between the two. For the PS4 and Pro versions, of course, we get all the same graphics settings as X, even the highest shadow quality with those clearer outlines. But of course, the resolution targets there change. Base PS4 is straightforward enough. This one is again a dynamic 1080p, but with far fewer drops than base Xbox One, putting it at lowest, 1728 by 972. This is the typical running figure in fact, around 90% on each axis, and barely noticeable really. The PS4 Pro, meanwhile, also inevitably sits as an in-between and runs at a dynamic 1800p. This ends up giving a 3200 by 1800 picture in those rare moments in practice races, but otherwise, expect drops as low as 60% per axis, down to 2304 by 1296. Comparisons between PS4, Pro and X show very little between them in core visual settings otherwise. It's just these resolution targets that differ. Of course, it's a shame to not see the full 60fps possible on PC. The fact is though, we have to be realistic, and the visual settings do compare reasonably well against the medium and high presets there. The most exceptional difference I think, as far as gameplay goes, is in the number of cars allowed on track. PC has the option to go up to 30, but that's dropped to 20 cars on the track including yourself, for all PS4 and Xbox One machines. It's a net win though when you consider the original Assetto Corsa only allowed 16 cars on the track, and in a sense this is where having a 30fps cap to factor in the CPU hit might have helped. The more vehicles visible on the track, the harder the physics simulation has to work. So how does performance hold on all consoles, and are there any true drops under 30 to worry about? A look at the base Xbox One says a lot. In my experience, even pushing it with heavy rain, lots of cars, there's been little to complain about. One-off hitches occasionally kick in, likely to do with asset streaming at speed. Otherwise, the real problem remains that awkward frame pacing, which at 33fps creates the impression of frame rate drops. There's no screen tear to worry about, thankfully, but when you kick into high gears on that glorious long chicane on Spa, the screen inconsistency is all the more glaring. But it'd be unfair to point this as a problem on any one machine. Xbox One has this issue, as does the X model. Every console runs with these variations in frame retention, and for a driving sim, it just can't be stressed enough. We need smoother feedback. It's just about fine for navigating the starting grid at low speeds, but later on, even X isn't as enjoyable to play as it should be. The same goes for the PlayStation 4 machines, but there is a twist here. PS4 Pro runs at the same level as you'd expect. There are no sub 30fps stutters as we saw on the base Xbox One, but the frame cadence is still an issue. The bizarre turn is the base PS4 version runs without any cap whatsoever. This is free to run the gamut, in other words, from 30 right up to 40fps as the peak on practice runs. The result? Well, the frame pacing is still very uneven, but at least we're getting more visual feedback from it in the end. It's far from ideal. VSync is still engaged, so there's no issues with tearing. It's just the machine will output every frame it's capable of rendering. For my money, it ended up being a slightly more pleasant experience, though most of gameplay is still, in the end, pushed down to the 30 FPS line. And of course, once too many cars hit the screen, that dynamic resolution logic kicks in to drop the pixel count. All round, the potential in Assetto Corsa Competizione is huge, but not realised on current gen machines. The frame rate needs a lot of work. Also, ideally, you will need a steering wheel to justify this as a pure sim experience, something that PC is better equipped for right now in terms of compatibility. For controller users like myself, it's worth warning that the out-of-the-box controller settings do need work. I found a decent layout here, bumping up the sensitivity, but it is a shame the experience isn't tuned up from the get-go. Put this one down as one to watch. It's hard to recommend wholeheartedly in the state it's currently in, but for future ports on Series X or PS5, it'll be fascinating to see how the Assetto experience translates. That's all from me today though. If you did find this useful, feel free to like or subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell to get notifications as any new video lands. To get this video at high quality, check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net, and to get in touch with me or the team, just use Twitter. But from me for now, thanks for watching.